desperate man in a sharp suit leaned precariously over the railing on a cold, silent bridge overlooking the restless river below. Across the street, a ragged boy named Nathan, whose world was defined by survival and solitude, hesitated as he caught sight of the man's trembling hands. The boy's instinct screamed to keep walking. Trouble was the last thing he needed. But something about the man's slumped shoulders, his haunted eyes, pulled Nathan closer. In that moment, two lives collided most unexpectedly, setting off a chain of events neither could have imagined. One was at the end of his rope, ready to give up everything. The other had already lost it all but still clung to the hope that kept him moving forward. What would happen when their worlds became intertwined, filled with opposing struggles and pain? Before we dive into this gripping tale of desperation, kindness, and redemption, drop a comment below, letting us know where you're watching from today. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more stories like Nathan's incredible journey. Nathan's hands trembled as he sifted through the trash bin behind the bustling diner. His fingers moved swiftly, combing through crumpled napkins, discarded plastic, and food scraps that weren't entirely spoiled. The muffled sounds of clinking dishes and chatter from inside contrasted sharply with the oppressive silence of the alley. The aroma of freshly cooked meals wafted out, teasing his empty stomach. Finally, he found a stale piece of bread and carefully inspected it for any clean spots. Before he could take a bite, the back door of the diner slammed open, and Nathan froze. His eyes widened like a cornered animal as a stout man with sweat stains under his arms stormed out. "Get out of here, you little rat," the man shouted, brandishing a greasy towel. Nathan's heart pounded as he scrambled backward, the bread slipping from his fingers. He darted out of the alley, the man's curses following him until they faded into the distance. A few passers-by glanced at him but quickly looked away, their indifference cutting more profound than the man's insults. Nathan recognized that look all too well, the look that pretended he didn't exist. By the time he stopped running, his stomach twisted painfully. He leaned against a cold brick wall a few blocks away, struggling to catch his breath. The evening air seeped through the holes in his threadbare shirt, making him shiver. The cold was a familiar companion, but tonight it seemed sharp, as if the world were pressing harder against him. Across the street, the glow of a cozy diner caught his eye. Through the window, Nathan saw a family, a father, a mother, and a little girl about his age, enjoying burgers. The father made a silly face, and the girl laughed, her joy so bright that it stung Nathan's chest. He swallowed hard, but his throat felt tight. He forced himself to look away, rubbing his arms and continuing down the dimly lit sidewalk. Nathan didn't have time to wallow. Darkness brought trouble, and trouble was something he had learned to avoid. He knew he needed to find a place to sleep for the night, and the bridge on the edge of town often had quiet corners where he could stay out of sight. The sun dipped below the horizon as he reached the bridge. The river below flowed dark and steady, reflecting the fiery hues of the sunset. Cars sped past, their headlights piercing the growing dusk. Nathan walked along the sidewalk, his mind clouded with the loneliness that had become his constant companion. He knew he wasn't the only one struggling, but it often felt that way out here. Then he saw him. A man stood at the edge of the bridge, his hands gripping the railing as he stared down at the river. He wore a neatly tailored suit, but his posture betrayed his despair. Nathan slowed his steps, his gaze narrowing. Something about the man's slumped shoulders and bowed head sent a chill through him. Nathan hesitated, unsure of what to do. He had seen desperation in the mirror, in the alleys, and in the faces of those who had given up. His chest tightened as he stepped closer. The man leaned forward slightly. His movements were tentative yet deliberate. Nathan's breath caught. Without thinking, he opened his mouth and began to hum. The melody was shaky and off-key, but it was the one his mother sang to him during their darkest nights. The song wasn't much, but it had always made him feel less alone. The man flinched and turned his head slightly as if pulled back from the edge by the faint sound. His hollow eyes met Nathan's, filled with confusion and pain. Nathan kept humming, his voice trembling but persistent as he inched closer. Finally, he reached out and touched the man's sleeve. "Hey," Nathan said, his voice barely audible over the rush of the river below. "Come on, just step back. okay? The man hesitated long, agonizingly, before slowly stepping away from the railing. He turned to face Nathan fully, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Nathan could see the weight of the man's burden etched into his face. "Thank you," the man whispered hoarsely, his voice barely carrying over the hum of passing cars. Nathan nodded, unsure of what to say. He watched as the man walked away, his steps unsteady but deliberate. Nathan stood there for a moment longer, the adrenaline leaving his body and leaving him cold. He found a quiet spot near the base of the bridge, leaning against the concrete wall. Pulling his knees to his chest, he let the night envelop him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had done something that mattered. The darkness around him felt a little less suffocating. Nathan didn't sleep well that night, his back aching from the unforgiving concrete. When the morning light crept across the bridge, he woke with a start. The sound of approaching footsteps made him rub his eyes, blinking against the brightness. His heart raced as he recognized the figure walking toward him. It was the man from last night, the one in the suit. Nathan tensed, ready to run if he needed to. People didn't just come back. When they did, it was rarely for anything good. But the man's hands were raised slightly in a gesture of peace, and his expression looked more apologetic than threatening. "Hey," the man said softly as he stopped a few feet away. His suit was disheveled, his tie missing, and the shadows under his eyes looked even deeper in the harsh morning light. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the side. "You remember me?" the man asked, his voice tinged with attitude and vulnerability. Nathan gave a slight nod but didn't speak. The man crouched down to Nathan's level, his movements slow and deliberate. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, his voice cracking. "You saved my life." Nathan shifted uneasily, his eyes fixed on the man crouching before him. The words "you saved my life" hung in the cold morning air, and for a moment neither spoke. Nathan wasn't used to gratitude. People usually shouted at him to leave or ignored him altogether. "What's your name?" the man asked, his voice soft. Nathan hesitated, considering whether to lie, but something in the man's tired eyes made him feel it wouldn't matter. "Nathan," he mumbled, barely audible. "Nathan," the man repeated as though testing the name on his tongue. "I'm Ethan." He paused, drawing a deep breath as though he was still finding the right words. "I owe you, Nathan. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there last night." Nathan shrugged, his shoulders tight. "You don't owe me anything," he said quickly. But Ethan shook his head. "I do. You didn't have to help me, but you did. And I can't just walk away after that." He looked around, taking in the ragged clothes Nathan wore and the thin blanket crumpled beside him. "Do you have somewhere to stay? A home?" Nathan's stomach clenched. He hated those questions. They always came with pity, and pity turned into empty promises. "I'm fine," he said shortly, standing up. Ethan stood too, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, Nathan," he said, his voice almost desperate. "Let me help you. I have a spare room and food. You don't have to keep living like this." Nathan's instincts screamed not to trust him. He had heard promises like these before, promises that people never followed through on. He shook his head, taking a step back. "I don't need your charity," he muttered. "It's not charity," Ethan replied firmly. "It's just gratitude. You helped me when I needed it most. Please let me return the favor." Nathan studied Ethan's face, searching for any hint of deceit. All he saw was sincerity, tinged with the same desperation he had seen the night before. Still, trust didn't come easy for Nathan. "I'll stay," he said finally, his voice low, "but just for a little while. And if I don't like it, I'm leaving." Ethan's face lit up with relief and he nodded quickly. "Of course, no strings attached, just as long as you need." Nathan followed Ethan to a car parked nearby. His steps were slow and hesitant, his gaze darting between Ethan and the sleek vehicle. He couldn't remember the last time he had been in a car, let alone one this clean. "You don't have to come if you don't want to," Ethan said gently, opening the passenger door. "It's your choice." Nathan swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he climbed in. The car's soft seat felt alien against his worn clothes, and the smell of leather and air freshener was almost overwhelming. Ethan closed the door behind him and walked around to the driver's side. The drive was quiet, the city blurring past in a wash of colors and motion. Nathan kept his hands folded tightly in his lap, his gaze fixed out the window. His mind raced with doubts and questions. Was this a mistake? What did Ethan really want? Ethan didn't say much, respecting the silence. Occasionally he glanced over at Nathan, his expression calm but watchful. When they pulled into a quiet neighborhood lined with trees and large houses, Nathan's stomach flipped. This wasn't like the streets he was used to. Everything here looked neat, safe, and far too perfect. Ethan parked in front of a modest but well-kept house and turned to Nathan. "Here we are," he said, his voice soft. Nathan hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. Every instinct told him to run, but he was tired of cold nights, empty stomachs, and running from everyone and everything. He followed Ethan to the front door, his steps cautious. Ethan unlocked it and gestured for Nathan to step inside. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of soap and something sweet that Nathan couldn't place. The living room was spacious but cozy, with a plush couch, framed photos on the walls, and shelves filled with books. Nathan stood awkwardly by the door, feeling out of place. "You must be hungry," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "I can make you something, or we can order in. Whatever you prefer." Nathan shrugged, his eyes still scanning the room. He wasn't used to having choices, and the idea of someone cooking for him felt strange. Ethan seemed to sense Nathan's unease. He nodded and took a step back. "Let's take it one step at a time," he said. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. If you want to leave, you can. No one's keeping you here." Nathan glanced at him, studying his face. Ethan's words sounded genuine, but Nathan still wasn't sure he could trust him. Ethan led Nathan upstairs to a small guest room. It was simple but inviting, with a neatly made bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the quiet street. "This is yours," Ethan said, "for as long as you need it." Nathan stood in the doorway, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He took a few tentative steps inside, his eyes sweeping over the room. The bed looked soft, almost too soft, and the blankets were folded neatly. He couldn't remember the last time he had slept in a bed. Ethan stayed by the door, giving Nathan space. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," he said. "Take your time." When Ethan's footsteps faded down the hallway, Nathan sat gingerly on the edge of the bed. The mattress sank slightly under his weight, and he ran his fingers over the smooth fabric of the blanket. He didn't know how long he would stay, maybe just one night, maybe longer. He wasn't ready to trust Ethan, not yet, but for now, he had a roof over his head, and he was warm. For now, that was enough. Nathan woke the next morning to a strange sensation, the softness of a real mattress beneath him and sunlight streaming through a clean window. For a moment he didn't remember where he was, his heart pounding as though he had woken on the streets, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Then it came back to him. The bridge, Ethan, the house. Nathan took a deep breath, his muscles slowly unclenching. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, the cool floor making him shiver. The hallway was quiet as he stepped out, his bare feet patting softly on the carpet. From downstairs came the faint sound of clattering dishes. Nathan hesitated before cautiously making his way toward the noise, his hand trailing along the banister. In the kitchen, Ethan stood at the counter with a frying pan in one hand. He wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, a stark contrast to the tailored suit Nathan had seen him in before. Ethan glanced up and smiled as Nathan entered. "Morning," Ethan said, his tone gentle. "I hope you're hungry. I tried making eggs. Not sure how they turned out, but they're edible at least." Nathan hesitated in the doorway, his eyes darting around the kitchen. It was bright and clean, the kind of place that felt too good for someone like him. Slowly he stepped inside and sat at the small table, keeping his movements cautious. Ethan set a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of Nathan, then took a seat across from him. "Go ahead," Ethan said, nodding toward the food. Nathan picked up his fork, his stomach twisting with hunger and unease. The eggs were warm and slightly overcooked, but they tasted better than anything he'd had in months. Ethan ate in silence, giving Nathan the space to eat without feeling pressured. Finally, after a few minutes, Ethan cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "we could go out later today. Get you some clothes and anything else you need." Nathan froze, his fork hovering over his plate. "I don't need anything," he said quickly, his tone defensive. Ethan raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I get it," he said, "but it's not about needing, it's about having. You deserve to have things that are yours, Nathan. No strings attached. Nathan didn't respond. He wasn't used to people offering him anything without expecting something in return. He kept his eyes on his plate, his jaw tightening. Ethan sighed softly, leaning back in his chair. Look, I know you don't trust me, and I get that. It's okay, but I want you to know I'm not going to hurt you or ask for anything from you. You saved my life, Nathan. Let me do something for you, even if it's small. Nathan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He wanted to believe Ethan, but years of disappointment and broken promises had left him wary. Still, something about Ethan's voice, steady and kind, made him pause. Fine, Nathan mumbled, barely audible. But just a few things, and I'm not staying forever. Ethan smiled, relief washing over his face. Deal, he said. We'll keep it simple. Later that day, they drove to a small clothing store. Nathan stayed close to Ethan, his shoulders hunched as they entered. The air inside smelled like fabric softener, and the racks of new clothes felt almost overwhelming. Take your time, Ethan said, gesturing toward the rows of shirts and jeans. Pick whatever you like. Nathan hesitated, his fingers brushing against the edge of a neatly folded sweater. He wasn't used to this, having options and being told to choose something for himself. Slowly, he picked out a few items, a couple of plain shirts, jeans, and socks. Is this okay? Nathan asked uncertainly, holding up the small pile of clothes. Ethan smiled and nodded. Perfect, he said. Let's grab some shoes too. They moved to the shoe section, where Ethan helped Nathan find a pair of sneakers. Nathan tried them on, marveling at how they fit perfectly. Not too tight, not falling apart at the seams. When they reached the checkout counter, Nathan watched uneasily as Ethan paid for everything. He half expected Ethan to demand something in return, but Ethan just handed Nathan the bags with a warm smile. Let's get you home, Ethan said as they walked back to the car. The ride back was quiet, and Nathan kept his eyes on the passing scenery. When they arrived, Nathan carried the bags to the small room Ethan had given him. He set them on the bed and stared at the clothes, running his fingers over the soft fabric. It still didn't feel real, having things that were his, having a place that felt safe. Nathan sat on the bed, his mind racing with doubts and questions. He still didn't fully trust Ethan, but for now, he was willing to see where this would go. That evening, Ethan called up the stairs. Nathan, you hungry? I was thinking about making spaghetti. Nathan hesitated before stepping out of his room and heading down. He still felt like an outsider in Ethan's home, but the smell of cooking drew him in. Ethan glanced up as Nathan entered the kitchen. There you are, Ethan said, smiling. You want to help? Nathan shrugged. I guess. Ethan handed him a knife and showed him how to slice the vegetables. They worked side by side, the silence between them less heavy than before. You're pretty good at this, Ethan said, nodding at Nathan's evenly sliced carrots. Nathan shrugged again, but a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. As they sat down to eat, Nathan couldn't help but feel a little more at ease. The warmth of the house, the quiet companionship of Ethan, it was unfamiliar, but it wasn't bad. For the first time in a long time, Nathan felt a flicker of hope. Nathan adjusted slowly to life in Ethan's home, though every day felt like walking on eggshells. The warmth and comfort of the house were foreign to him, making him feel more like a guest than someone who belonged. Ethan, however, remained patient, never rushing Nathan to adapt. Ethan would greet him with a warm smile each morning and offer Nathan breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, cereal, and everything that still felt luxurious. The unease in Nathan's chest lingered, a constant reminder that he didn't quite trust what was happening. One day, after dinner, Ethan approached Nathan as they sat in the living room. Nathan, Ethan began, his voice careful, I wanted to talk to you about something. Nathan tensed, his body stiffening. What is it? He asked, his voice guarded. Book back. Ethan hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. I was thinking, maybe you'd want to go back to school. Nathan's stomach dropped. School? He repeated, his tone sharp. Yeah, Ethan said, his expression earnest. You're smart, Nathan. I can see it. I think you'd do really well if you gave it a shot, and I'd be here to help you every step of the way. Nathan shook his head, standing abruptly. No, he said firmly. I don't need school. I've been fine without it. Ethan frowned but didn't push. I get it, he said softly. It's a big step, but just think about it, okay? There's no rush. Nathan didn't respond. He turned and walked to his room, closing the door behind him. His chest felt tight as he leaned against the door, his mind racing. The thought of school brought back memories he had tried to bury. The whispers of classmates, the cold stares of teachers, the overwhelming sense that he didn't belong. He flopped onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. School felt like a place for people who had futures, and Nathan wasn't sure he was one of them. The next morning, Ethan didn't bring it up again, but the idea lingered in Nathan's mind. As the days passed, he began to notice little things. A soccer game on TV that reminded him of how much he had missed playing, or the books on Ethan's shelves that made him wonder what it would be like to learn again. One evening, after another quiet dinner, Nathan found himself in the kitchen helping Ethan wash dishes. The warm water soothed his hands, and the rhythmic clinking of plates filled the silence. "About the school thing," Nathan said suddenly, his voice low. Ethan looked up, his expression cautious. "Yeah?" Nathan swallowed hard. "Maybe I could try," he said, barely audible. "I'm not promising anything, but I could try." Ethan's face lit up, a wide smile spreading across his features. "That's all I'm asking, Nathan," he said warmly. "Just a chance. And if it doesn't work out, we'll figure something else out. No pressure." Nathan nodded, his chest tightening with a mix of fear and anticipation. The following week, Ethan took Nathan to a nearby school. Nathan kept his head down as they walked through the halls, his stomach churning with nerves. The principal, a kind woman named Mrs. Harris, greeted them warmly. "So Nathan," she said, her tone gentle. "Ethan here tells me you're interested in starting school again. That's wonderful." Nathan shifted in his seat, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I guess," he mumbled. Mrs. Harris nodded, understanding. "It's okay to feel nervous. We'll start slow, maybe just a few hours a day, and see how it goes. If you ever feel overwhelmed, you can come talk to me." "Deal?" Nathan glanced up at her, surprised by her calm demeanor. "Deal," he said softly. Ethan gave Nathan an encouraging pat on the shoulder as they left the office. "You did great," he said. Nathan wasn't so sure. The first day of school was every bit as difficult as Nathan had feared. The moment he walked into the classroom, he felt every pair of eyes on him. The teacher, a kind-looking woman with glasses, introduced him to the class. "This is Nathan," she said with a warm smile. "He'll be joining us starting today." Nathan nodded mutely, quickly taking the empty desk at the back of the room. His heart pounded as he fumbled with his notebook, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The lessons were a blur of words and numbers that didn't make sense. Nathan felt like he was drowning, struggling to keep up while the rest of the class seemed miles ahead. At lunch, he sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at the sandwich Ethan had packed for him. The room's noise, laughter, conversations, and the clatter of trays felt overwhelming. When the day finally ended, Nathan bolted out of the school, relieved to see Ethan waiting for him by the car. "How was it?" Ethan asked as Nathan climbed in. Nathan shrugged, his face flushed with frustration. "It was fine," he muttered, though it felt far from the truth. Ethan didn't press. "I'm proud of you for going," he said quietly. That night, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, staring at a math workbook Ethan had bought for him. He couldn't make sense of the problems, and his frustration bubbled over. "I can't do this," Nathan snapped, pushing the book away. Ethan remained calm, sliding the book back toward him. "Yes, you can," he said gently. "It's okay to struggle. That's how you learn. Let's try it together." With Ethan's patient guidance, Nathan slowly began to understand. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but for the first time, Nathan felt like someone believed in him. Later that night, as Nathan lay in bed, he thought about the day. It had been burdensome, harder than he had expected. But he hadn't given up, and that felt like a small victory. The following weeks were a test of Nathan's resilience. Each day at school felt like climbing a mountain, and every step brought new challenges. He struggled to keep up with the lessons, often finding himself lost in a maze of equations, grammar rules, and history facts that seemed just out of reach. The whispers of his classmates didn't help. "Why is he so quiet? Do you think he's like dumb or something?" Nathan pretended not to hear, but the words stuck, digging into him like splinters. He kept his head down, trying to stay invisible, but it wasn't easy. Ethan noticed the strain on Nathan's face each evening. Nathan tried to hide it, but his hunched shoulders and tired eyes gave him away. Ethan didn't push, though. Instead, he offered quiet support, helping with homework, cooking dinner, and making space for Nathan to share when he was ready. One Friday evening, Ethan brought up something new. "Nathan," he said over a plate of spaghetti, "how about trying something outside of class? Maybe a club or a team?" Nathan blinked, caught off guard. "Like what?" he asked cautiously. "Well," Ethan said, smiling slightly, "how about soccer? I saw you watching that match on TV last week. You seemed interested." Nathan hesitated. He had watched the game, and something about it had stirred a memory, kicking a ball around in the streets with kids he barely knew, laughing despite the chaos of his life. But joining a team felt like a leap too far. "I don't know," Nathan muttered, twirling his fork through his pasta. Ethan leaned forward, his voice encouraging. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. The school has a soccer club, and the coach is a good guy. He'd be happy to have you." Nathan didn't answer, but the idea lingered in his mind long after dinner. The following Monday, Mrs. Harris approached Nathan during lunch. "Nathan," she said kindly, "I heard from Ethan that you might be interested in soccer. Coach Ryder is holding tryouts tomorrow after school. Would you like to give it a shot?" Nathan hesitated, his stomach flipping. The idea of standing on a field, surrounded by kids who already knew what they were doing, made his chest tighten. But then he thought of Ethan's encouragement and the memory of those carefree street games. "Maybe," Nathan said finally. Mrs. Harris smiled. "No pressure. Just show up if you feel ready." The next day, Nathan found himself on the soccer field, his heart pounding. A group of boys and girls were already warming up, their laughter and shouts filling the air. Nathan stayed near the edge, unsure of where to start. Coach Ryder, a tall man with a friendly smile, noticed him and walked over. "You must be Nathan," the coach said, extending a hand. "Glad you're here. Don't worry about anything. Just do your best." Nathan nodded, his throat dry. The practice started with simple drills, passing, dribbling, and shooting. Nathan's movements were clumsy at first, his feet unused to the structured techniques. But Coach Ryder was patient, showing him the basics and encouraging him with every attempt. As the practice went on, something shifted. Nathan began to find a rhythm, his muscles remembering the way a ball felt underfoot. By the time they played a small scrimmage at the end of practice, Nathan felt a flicker of confidence. He wasn't the best player, but he was part of the team, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. After practice, Coach Ryder clapped him on the shoulder. "Good work, Nathan," he said. "Keep it up and you'll fit right in." Nathan smiled, a rare and genuine expression. "Thanks, Coach," he said quietly. When Nathan got home that evening, Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, a hopeful look on his face. "How was it?" Ethan asked as Nathan dropped his bag by the door. Nathan shrugged, but his lips twitched upward. "It was good," he admitted. Ethan grinned. "I knew you'd do great. I'm proud of you, Nathan." Those words hit Nathan harder than he expected. He looked down, his chest tightening with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Thanks," he mumbled. That night, Nathan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The day had been exhausting, but it had also felt like a step forward. Soccer wasn't just a game. It was a chance to be part of something bigger and prove that he could succeed. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of school, soccer practices, and evenings spent with Ethan. Slowly but surely, Nathan began to feel a little more at ease. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was growing. Ethan noticed the change in Nathan's demeanor. The boy who had once been guarded and tense now smiled more often, his eyes shining with a light that hadn't been there before. One evening, after a particularly good soccer practice, Nathan sat on the couch with Ethan, flipping through channels on the TV. "I think I like it," Nathan said suddenly. Ethan glanced at him, surprised. "Soccer?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah, it's fun. And the other kids aren't so bad." Ethan smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "I'm really glad to hear that, Nathan. You're doing amazing." Nathan didn't reply, but he felt a warmth in his chest that he couldn't quite explain. For the first time in years, Nathan felt like he was more than just a kid surviving on the streets. He was part of a team, part of a home, part of a life that felt like it might actually be worth living. Nathan's days gradually fell into a rhythm. School in the morning, soccer practice in the afternoon, and evenings spent at home with Ethan. Though each day brought its challenges, Nathan felt like he was starting to find his footing. But nothing ever stayed easy for long. One Thursday in math class, Nathan's teacher, Mr. Carter, was explaining quadratic equations, his voice patient but methodical as he scribbled on the whiteboard. Nathan stared at his notebook, his pencil frozen in midair. The numbers and letters swam before his eyes, twisting into shapes that made no sense. "Nathan," Mr. Carter said suddenly, breaking through his thoughts. "Why don't you come up and solve this one on the board?" Nathan's heart dropped into his stomach. His classmates turned to look at him, their eyes sharp with curiosity or quiet judgment. He stood slowly, his legs shaky as he made his way to the front of the room. The marker felt heavy in his hand as he stared at the problem on the board. His mind was blank, the equations a blur of symbols he couldn't untangle. "You've got this," Mr. Carter encouraged, but the whispers from the back of the room drowned out the teacher's calm voice. "What's he doing? He doesn't even know where to start." Nathan's face burned, and his grip on the marker tightened. He scribbled anything on the board, but he knew it was wrong. The snickers from his classmates confirmed it. "All right, Nathan," Mr. Carter said gently, taking the marker from his hand. "Why don't you take a seat? We'll go over it together later." Nathan lowered his head and trudged back to his desk, his face hot with humiliation. He kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, willing himself not to cry. When the bell rang, he grabbed his bag and bolted out of the classroom, ignoring the laughter that followed him. Outside, he leaned against the wall, his breath coming in short gasps. He felt like an idiot, like he didn't belong here. Why had he ever thought he could keep up with these kids? When Ethan picked him up after school, Nathan slammed the car door shut without a word. Ethan glanced at him, concern etched on his face. "Rough day?" he asked gently. Nathan stared out the window, his jaw tight. "I don't want to talk about it," he muttered. Ethan didn't press, letting the silence settle as they drove home. That evening, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, his math textbook open but untouched. Ethan joined him, setting down a mug of tea. "Want to talk about what happened?" Ethan asked softly. Nathan shook his head. "I'm just not good at this," he said bitterly. "I don't belong in that school. I don't even know why I'm trying." Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Nathan, you're not failing. You're learning, and learning takes time. It's okay to struggle. That's how you grow." Nathan looked up, his eyes stinging. "I just feel stupid," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's expression softened. "You're not stupid, Nathan. You're brave. It takes courage to show up every day, even when it's hard, and I'm here to help you through it, every step of the way." For a moment, Nathan didn't speak. Then he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "Let's work on this together," Ethan said, pulling the textbook closer. They spent the next hour breaking down the equations step by step. Ethan's patience never wavered, even when Nathan grew frustrated. Slowly, Nathan began to see patterns in the numbers, connections he hadn't noticed before. By the time they finished, Nathan felt a flicker of understanding, a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "See?" Ethan said with a smile. "You've got this." Nathan allowed himself a small smile. "Thanks," he said quietly. The next day, Nathan returned to school with a mix of dread and determination. He still felt out of place, but Ethan's words echoed in his mind. "You're not failing. You're learning." In math class, Mr. Carter called on Nathan again, but this time, Nathan raised his hand before anyone else could. He walked to the board, his heart pounding, and carefully worked through the problem. His answer wasn't perfect, but it was close. "Good work, Nathan," Mr. Carter said, smiling. Nathan returned to his seat, ignoring the surprised looks from his classmates. For the first time, he felt a small spark of confidence. That afternoon at soccer practice, Nathan's progress continued. Coach Ryder had noticed Nathan's growing confidence and encouraged him to take on a more active role during scrimmages. "Don't be afraid to call for the ball," Coach said, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. "You've got the instincts. You just need to trust yourself." During the game, Nathan found himself in a position to score. His teammate passed the ball to him, and for a split second, everything else faded away. Nathan kicked, and the ball soared past the goalkeeper into the net. The team erupted in cheers, and Nathan felt a rush of pride, unlike anything he had ever experienced. After practice, Coach Ryder pulled him aside. "You've come a long way, Nathan," he said with a smile. "Keep it up." Nathan nodded, his chest swelling with a sense of accomplishment. A warm smile when he got home that evening. When he got home that evening, how was practice? Ethan asked as Nathan dropped his bag by the door. I scored, Nathan said, a small grin spreading across his face. Ethan's eyes lit up. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you, Nathan. Nathan felt a quiet sense of contentment as they sat down for dinner. He still had a long way to go. School was still tough, and he still had moments of doubt. But for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he could succeed. Saturday morning came with a sense of calm that Nathan had rarely experienced. The past week had been full of challenges, but it had also been filled with small victories. For once, he didn't feel the same heavy dread weighing him down. Ethan knocked on Nathan's bedroom door, peeking in with a grin. Morning, Nathan. Got a plan for today? You up for a little fun? Nathan blinked, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. What kind of fun? He asked cautiously. Ethan stepped inside, holding up a small flyer. There's an arcade not far from here. Thought we could check it out. Play some games and relax a bit. What do you think? Nathan hesitated. He'd never been to an arcade before, not as a paying guest anyway. He'd looked through the windows a few times, watching kids his age laughing and playing, but he'd always stayed on the outside. Sure, I guess, Nathan said, trying to hide his excitement. Great, Ethan said with a wide smile. Get ready, and we'll head out in a bit. When they arrived at the arcade, Nathan's eyes widened at the sights and sounds. Bright neon lights glowed against colorful walls, and the air buzzed with the hum of games, laughter, and the clinking of tokens. Ethan handed Nathan a small pouch filled with tokens. Here you go. Use them wisely, he joked, winking. Nathan took the pouch, his hands trembling slightly. He followed Ethan into the maze of games, his gaze darting from one flashing screen to another. Let's start here, Ethan said, pointing to a racing game. The two of them slid into side-by-side seats, gripping the plastic steering wheels as the countdown began. Nathan's heart raced as he steered through the virtual track, narrowly avoiding obstacles while Ethan crashed into nearly every barrier. Hey, no fair! Ethan laughed as Nathan sped past him. Nathan grinned for the first time in a long while, his chest feeling lighter than it had in months. They moved from game to game, shooting hoops, hitting targets in a water gun challenge, and even trying their luck at a claw machine. Nathan watched as Ethan tried to grab a small stuffed bear, only for the claw to slip and drop it every time. Let me try, Nathan said, stepping up to the controls. He carefully positioned the claw and pressed the button. The claw closed around a tiny plush animal and lifted it slowly, the tension thick in the air as it wobbled toward the chute. When the toy finally dropped into the prize bin, Nathan couldn't help but let out a triumphant laugh. You did it! Ethan cheered, clapping him on the back. Nathan reached into the bin, pulling out the plush toy. It was a small, slightly lopsided fox with bright orange fur. He held it up, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment. It's yours, Ethan said with a smile. Nathan hesitated, then slipped the toy into his pocket. Thanks, he said softly. As they continued playing, Nathan began to let his guard down. For a few hours, it felt like he wasn't a kid who had spent years surviving on the streets. He was just a boy having fun with someone who cared. When their tokens finally ran out, Ethan suggested they grab a bite to eat at the small cafe attached to the arcade. They sat at a table with burgers and fries, the smell of greasy food filling the air. This was fun, Nathan admitted between bites. Ethan's face lit up. I'm glad. You deserve to have fun, Nathan. Life shouldn't always be about surviving. You've got to have moments like this, too. Nathan didn't respond, but Ethan's words stuck with him. On the drive home, Nathan kept glancing at the fox plush in his lap, running his fingers over its soft fur. It wasn't much, but it felt like a symbol of something he hadn't had in a lifetime. Hope. That night, as Nathan lay in bed, he thought about the day. For the first time, he realized how much Ethan had done for him, not just by providing a roof over his head, but by showing him kindness without expecting anything in return. It wasn't an easy thought for Nathan to process. Trust was still hard, and part of him kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but as he clutched the plush fox close, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, Ethan truly cared. The next morning, Ethan greeted Nathan with his usual warm smile. Sleep well? He asked. Nathan nodded. Yeah, thanks for yesterday. Anytime, Ethan said, his voice sincere. We'll have more days like that, promise. Nathan didn't say it, but he found himself hoping that was true. The weeks after their trip to the arcade were transformative for Nathan. The plush fox he had won became a small but meaningful reminder of how far he had come, a token of safety, joy, and connection in a life that had been void of all three for far too long. At school, Mrs. Harris and Coach Ryder continued to support Nathan, checking in with him regularly. Mrs. Harris encouraged him to keep asking questions in class and reminded him that struggling was part of learning. Meanwhile, soccer practice became a highlight of Nathan's week, a place where he could release his frustrations and feel like part of a team. One afternoon after practice, Coach Ryder pulled Nathan aside. "Hey Nathan," the coach said, his tone light, "you've been doing great out there. I think you're ready for your first game." Nathan blinked in surprise. "Me? In a game?" "Absolutely," Coach said with a smile. "We've got a match next Friday, and I want you on the lineup. It's just a friendly, so no pressure. Think about it, okay?" Nathan nodded, his heart pounding. The idea of playing in front of a crowd was both thrilling and terrifying. When he got home that evening, Ethan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. "How was practice?" Ethan asked, glancing up. "Coach said I could play in the next game," Nathan said, his voice hesitant. Ethan's face lit up. "That's fantastic, Nathan. You're gonna do great." "I don't know," Nathan said, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. "What if I mess up?" Ethan set the knife down and turned to face Nathan. "Nathan, listen to me. You've been working hard. You've earned this. And even if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're trying, that you're putting yourself out there." Nathan nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," he said. That weekend, Ethan took Nathan shopping for soccer gear. They picked out cleats, shin guards, and a jersey with the school's colors. Nathan couldn't remember the last time he had owned something brand new, and as he tried on the cleats, he felt a flicker of excitement. "Looking good," Ethan said with a grin. Nathan couldn't help but smile back. The day of the game arrived faster than Nathan expected. As he stood on the field during warm-ups, his stomach churned with nerves. The small crowd in the stands felt enormous, and the weight of their eyes made his chest tight. "You've got this," Coach Ryder said, clapping him on the shoulder. When the game began, Nathan found himself running on pure adrenaline. The other players moved with practiced ease, but Nathan focused on the basics: passing, staying in position, and keeping his head up. Midway through the game, the ball came to Nathan's feet. For a split second, everything else faded away. He dribbled past one defender, then another, his heart racing as he neared the goal. "Shoot!" one of his teammates shouted. Nathan planted his foot and kicked with all his might. The ball sailed past the goalkeeper and into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Nathan stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. Then his teammates swarmed him, patting him on the back and shouting his name. By the time the game ended, Nathan felt a sense of pride he had never known. They hadn't won, but he had scored, and that was a victory in itself. Bookmark. Ethan was waiting for him near the field, his face beaming. "You were amazing out there," Ethan said, pulling Nathan into a quick hug. Nathan stiffened at first, but then relaxed, a shy smile spreading across his face. "Thanks," he said softly. That night, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Nathan realized something he hadn't dared to admit before. He trusted Ethan. For months, he had waited for the kindness to come with strings, for the warmth to turn cold. But it hadn't. Ethan had been patient, consistent, and genuine. "You know," Nathan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've never really had anyone like you before." Ethan paused the movie and turned to Nathan, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone who cares," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who doesn't just leave." Ethan's eyes softened. "Nathan, I'm not going anywhere. I promised you that, and I meant it. You're family now, as far as I'm concerned." Nathan's chest tightened, a lump forming in his throat. "Family," he echoed, the word unfamiliar and heavy. Ethan nodded. "Family," he said firmly. Nathan didn't respond, but the weight of Ethan's words settled over him like a warm blanket. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. The next week, Nathan opened up to Sarah, the school mentor Mrs. Harris had introduced him to. Sarah was easy to talk to, and her warm smile and encouraging words put Nathan at ease. "How's everything going, Nathan?" Sarah asked during one of their meetings. It's better, Nathan admitted. I still don't get everything in school, but it's not as bad as before. And soccer's been fun. That's great to hear, Sarah said, nodding. You're making progress, and that's what matters. Remember, it's okay to take things one step at a time. Nathan nodded. He still had doubts and still struggled with the idea that he deserved any of this. But he was starting to believe it might be true. Over the next few weeks, Nathan's life began to take on a stability he had never known before. The routines of school, soccer, and evenings with Ethan provided a rhythm that brought him a sense of security. While doubts and struggles still lingered, they were no longer all-consuming. At school, Nathan had started answering questions in class, even volunteering to go to the board when he thought he had the right answer. The whispers that used to follow him had grown quieter, and while he still felt out of place at times, he no longer felt entirely invisible. One day, during a group assignment in history class, Nathan surprised himself. One of his classmates, a boy named Alex, was struggling with the material. You just have to look at how the events connect, Nathan said, leaning over to show Alex his notes. Like the treaty they signed here led to the conflict later because they didn't actually solve the problem. Alex blinked, clearly impressed. Oh, that makes sense. Thanks. Nathan nodded, returning to his own work. He hadn't realized how much he had learned until that moment, and the small exchange left him feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. After school, soccer practice had become a place where Nathan felt most at ease. The team had accepted him as one of their own, and the laughter and camaraderie during drills made him feel like he belonged. One Friday evening, Coach Ryder pulled Nathan aside after practice. Nathan, you've been a real asset to the team, he said. I can see how much effort you're putting in, and it's paying off. Keep it up. Nathan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Thanks, Coach. When Nathan returned home, Ethan greeted him with his usual warmth. How was practice? Good, Nathan said, setting his bag down. Coach said I'm doing well. That's great to hear, Ethan said, his face lighting up. I'm proud of you, Nathan. You've come a long way. Nathan hesitated, then asked, Why do you care so much? Ethan blinked, surprised by the question. What do you mean? I was just some kid on the street, Nathan said, his voice low. You didn't have to help me. So why did you? Ethan's expression softened. He pulled out a chair and gestured for Nathan to sit. Nathan, when I met you on that bridge, I was at my lowest point, he said. You didn't know me, but you still helped me. You sang that song and reminded me that there's hope, even when things feel impossible. You saved me that night. How could I not care about you after that? Nathan looked down at the table, his chest tightening. I don't feel like I deserve it, he admitted. You do, Ethan said firmly. You deserve every bit of kindness, every chance to be happy. And I'm going to keep reminding you of that until you believe it. The words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. For the first time, Nathan felt like he might be able to let go of the guilt and doubt that had weighed him down for so long. That weekend, Ethan suggested that they do something special to celebrate Nathan's progress. How about a day out? Ethan said. Your choice, anything you want to do. Nathan thought for a moment before replying. Can we just go to the park? Maybe kick the ball around? Perfect, Ethan said with a grin. At the park, they found an open field and passed the soccer ball back and forth. Nathan laughed as Ethan tried and failed to perform a fancy trick, stumbling and nearly falling in the process. You're terrible at this, Nathan teased, his voice light. Hey, I'm letting you win, Ethan shot back, grinning. For the first time, Nathan felt completely at ease. The park was quiet, the warm sun casting long shadows over the grass. At that moment, the weight of his past felt distant, almost like it belonged to someone else. As they sat on the grass catching their breath, Ethan turned to Nathan. You've changed a lot since I first met you, Ethan said. You're stronger than you think. Nathan looked down, plucking at the blades of grass. I'm just trying, he said. And that's enough, Ethan said. One step at a time, remember? Nathan nodded, his chest swelling with a feeling he was starting to recognize. Hope. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Nathan caught himself humming the same tune he had sung on the bridge that night. Ethan glanced over, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Still a good song, Ethan said. Yeah, Nathan said, his voice soft. The night ended with them sitting on the couch, watching a soccer match on TV. Nathan leaned back against the cushions, the plush fox from the arcade resting on his lap. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a home, not just a roof over his head, but a place where he was safe, cared for, and wanted. Nathan woke up early on Monday morning, the faint light of dawn streaming through the curtains. He stretched, feeling the soft mattress beneath him and the blanket that still carried the faint scent of fabric softener. For a moment he just lay there, soaking in the quiet warmth of the morning. Today was a big day. His first soccer match as an official team member in front of the school's supporters. The thought sent a nervous flutter through his chest, but it was accompanied by a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Ethan was already downstairs when Nathan came into the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the air, and Ethan greeted him with a bright smile. "Big day today," Ethan said, sliding a plate across the counter toward Nathan. "Yeah," Nathan replied, sitting down and taking a bite of toast. His stomach churned with nerves, but the comforting routine of breakfast helped settle him. "You ready?" Ethan asked, his tone gentle. Nathan hesitated before nodding. "I think so." Ethan leaned on the counter, his expression serious. "No matter what happens out there, Nathan, I'm proud of you. Just remember to enjoy it, okay? It's supposed to be fun." Nathan nodded again, his chest tightening at the words. He wasn't used to hearing them, but they never failed to leave an impact. At the field, the air buzzed with energy. Students, parents, and teachers filled the bleachers, their cheers echoing across the grass. Nathan stood with his team, the crisp jersey fitting snugly against his shoulders. "You've got this," Coach Ryder said, clapping Nathan on the back. Nathan took a deep breath as the referee blew the whistle. The game started, and all his nerves seemed to melt away as his instincts took over. The match was intense, with each team fighting for control of the ball. Nathan ran harder than he ever had, his focus sharp as he passed, defended, and chased down opportunities. Then it happened. Late in the second half, with the score tied, the ball came to Nathan just outside the penalty box. Time seemed to slow as he planted his foot and struck the ball with everything he had. It soared through the air, curving past the outstretched hands of the goalkeeper and into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Nathan stood frozen for a moment, the sound washing over him. His teammates swarmed him, shouting his name and patting him on the back. "Great shot, Nathan." As the game ended with a win for his team, Nathan walked off the field, his chest swelling with pride. He spotted Ethan in the crowd, clapping and cheering louder than anyone else. Ethan met him at the edge of the field, pulling him into a quick hug. "That was incredible, Nathan. You were amazing out there." Nathan grinned, his face flushed with a mix of exertion and happiness. "Thanks," he said, his voice breathless. That night, as they celebrated with takeout pizza and watched highlights from the game, Nathan reflected on how far he had come. The boy who had once searched through trash for scraps of food, who had been too afraid to trust anyone, was now part of a team, part of a school, and part of a home. "You know," Nathan said suddenly, turning to Ethan, "I think I finally get it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Get what? Why didn't you give up on me?" Nathan said, his voice thoughtful. I think I needed someone to believe in me before I could believe in myself." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "And now you do." Nathan nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yeah, I think I do." The next morning, Nathan woke up with a sense of purpose. He got ready for school, pulling on his clean uniform and combing his hair without Ethan having to remind him. As they drove to school, Nathan looked out the window at the passing streets, the world outside feeling a little brighter than it had before. When they reached the school, Ethan parked and turned to Nathan. "Remember, one step at a time," Ethan said, his voice steady. Nathan smiled. "I got it," he said, grabbing his bag and stepping out of the car. As he walked through the school gates, Nathan no longer felt like he was walking into a place he didn't belong. He was still learning, still growing, but he knew now that he had a future. And that future wasn't just something distant and unreachable. It was something he was building, step by step, day by day. Ethan had given him more than a home. He had given him the tools to believe in himself. And with that belief, Nathan knew he could face whatever came next. Nathan's journey serves as a reminder that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness can ignite hope. It shows that believing in someone can change their life, and that with support, even the most broken spirits can heal. Nathan's story is one of transformation, showing the profound impact that compassion and belief can have on a person's life. From a boy who had known only hardship, fear, and survival, Nathan became someone who found joy, connection, and hope. Through Ethan's unwavering kindness, he discovered that even when the world feels impossibly dark, a single act of care can spark a light that guides the way forward. This story reminds us that no one is beyond help, and sometimes all it takes to change a life is to see someone's potential and offer them a chance. Ethan's decision to repay Nathan's selfless act with his own compassion shows that kindness is not just about grand gestures, but about consistency and patience. It's about showing up and believing, even when someone hasn't yet learned to believe in themselves. The lessons from this tale are clear. Hope thrives when nurtured, trust takes time to build, but can transform lives, and the smallest moments of connection can lead to profound change. Nathan's journey is a testament to resilience and the healing power of belonging. If this story moves you, we want to hear your thoughts. Did it inspire you? If you found the story good, comment with a 1. If you thought it was amazing, comment with a 2. Bookmark Go Back. We'd also love to hear about your stories. Has an act of kindness changed your life? Or have you been inspired by someone who believed in you when you needed it most? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to read them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next meaningful and heartwarming story we share. Your voice matters, and we can't wait to hear what you think of this incredible journey. Let us know in the comments below.